morning. Great to see you here for this first session of today. Going to talk about hydrogen. We're going to take a deep dive into the new wonder fuel of the future, hopefully. My name is Paul de Leeuw. I'm going to be your moderator for this session from Robert Gordon University in Aberdeen. And I'm going to talk first about what the plan for today is before I hand over to our esteemed panel to give you a little bit more insight about the whole hydrogen agenda. So what we're going to do, we're going to get a quick introduction from Erik first, from Deloitte, around setting the kind of the macro context for the hydrogen market, so that everybody's on the same wavelength, same level of understanding. Then I'm going to ask each of the other panel members to do a quick introduction about themselves and about the company before I open it up for questions. I'll start with questions, but then I'm going to come to you as the audience to make sure that we get your questions into the room. So you've got about 20 minutes to think about some really clever questions for the panel here. So that's the plan. I want to make it as interactive as possible, as energizing and high energy as possible. So that's our mission for today. Before I do so, can I maybe first hand over to Erik to maybe set some context. Erik, over to you.
Thank you very much, Paul, and welcome here. I realize it's an early morning in Amsterdam, so I thought just to get the energy in the room, I'll just dazzle you with some slides and facts and figures and stats. I wrote the points I was trying to make on a piece of paper, otherwise I digress too much. It's just to basically set the scene and just to tee us up a bit. Let's see. First interesting slide. We've done a bit of an analysis on this, and we drew that also from public sources, but it's also part of the energy outlook that we make every year. Within Deloitte, I'm responsible for energy and resources practice in Europe, and hydrogen is a development that we continue to follow. And we see a lot of developments, and our clients are actively asking us for opinions, etc. So we're trying to do our best to keep up with that. First thing that we see, if we look at 2020 to 2050, is that both low-carbon electrons and molecules will be required. So it's not either or. It's also not, that we don't need to have any molecules anymore. What we see in 2020, we see that almost 3/4 of the energy consumed globally originated from fossil molecules, and we see that changing over time. We anticipate that it changes over time towards 2050. Expectation is that low-carbon electrons will be used to power buildings, transport, and industry. Certain parts of industry, I think heavy industry, less likely, making about half of the energy consumed globally. And we see low-carbon molecules to power activities across industry, making up about 1/3 of the energy consumed globally. Especially in hard-to-abate sectors, cement, steel, aviation, etc., we expect that hydrogen will play a very important role. Whatever scenario you look at, be it the sky scenarios from Shell or from the International Energy Agency or the Hydrogen Council, it's all clear that it will grow. The only thing which is a bit more uncertain is the pace in which that will take place. Despite this uncertainty, all three scenarios show that global clean hydrogen production and consumption in 2050 will exceed the current grey hydrogen production and consumption. I think that's a good thing to be cognizant of. Then, I think this is especially interesting for a lot of the companies that are also present here at this event this week. We expect a lot of new offshore assets will be required to support the growth of the hydrogen production. We're talking about new electricity hubs will be needed, energy hubs, which will combine electrical connections with hydrogen conversion and transmission. Innovations will be needed, and we are actually having a discussion that those innovations go very, very rapidly. Think about the electrolyzers, for instance, that are needed, but also other elements like floating solar. I had a really engaging conversation with someone yesterday who alluded to that. And of course, all the vessels, the equipment to realize these assets will be required. But what we believe is that action is still needed to enable the development of the hydrogen economy, because there is no hydrogen economy at present at scale which is required. Financing needs to become available that lowers the cost of capital for hydrogen projects. That's one element of there. Partnerships between public and private institutions are needed to raise the required investments, de-risk these investments, and speed up regulatory and permitting processes. And that's, I think, if I may speak freely, but I realize this is all taped and probably online somewhere, but I think that also in Europe we're not really upping our game there yet. It's not, we're not making it lives easy for the companies to do this. New commercial and business models to make sure that after subsidies, this is just something which is viable on its own. And then collaboration across the supply chain, which also leaves a lot to be desired at the moment. I think those are a couple of things where we see that these are fundamental, let's say, prerequisites to make sure that there will be a viable hydrogen economy moving forward. And I would like to leave it with that. Hand it back over to Paul to do the introduction of the rest of the team. And I'm looking forward to an engaging conversation also with you, of course. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Eric. That was super context. And I like your 4 points, and I'm going to come back to them. So be ready for it. I want to hear your views. Forget the filming. No, not to worry. I want to do quick introductions before we start the conversation. Miriam, can we start with you first? Come from a very different background, so nice to hear that.
Thank you, Paul. It's a pleasure to be here today. So I'm Miriam from Copenhagen Infrastructure Partners. So CIP, we are today the world's largest fund manager in greenfield renewable energy infrastructure. This means that we are one of the funds that are able to invest in projects already from a very early stage. CIP today manages 11 funds, and out of those, one, it's the Energy Transition Fund, which is focusing specifically on green hydrogen investments and derivatives of green hydrogen. We are the world's largest fund dedicated to Power-to-X. We have raised 3.2 billion that we are currently looking to invest globally. And we do believe very much in the good match between offshore wind and hydrogen. We are currently looking at more near-term opportunities where we're going to see offshore wind farms linked to onshore electrolyzers. But we are also looking forward into a future where we see that more will be taking place at sea, and therefore we're starting to invest in the technologies for the future on offshore hydrogen production, and also on energy islands, which are really based on the same concept that offshore wind and hydrogen are a good match.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Next.
Yeah, my name is Lex de Groot. I'm a managing director of Neptune Energy here in the Netherlands. Neptune Energy, there's no doubt about it, is at this moment a fossil fuel company, delivering the energy of today in 8 countries around the world. And here in Europe, we are in Norway, UK, Germany, and in the Netherlands. We have our eye clearly on the ball, I would say, in the energy transition. We're looking at the options, how we can contribute to reducing carbon emissions to air. Very specifically, we are very advanced in a CCS project, so storing CO2 in depleted gas fields here in the North Sea, but also taking the first steps already for a few years in green hydrogen offshore production. We believe that the energy transition, and especially this hydrogen transition, can be built efficiently, faster, cheaper, and with less emissions if you build it on existing knowledge, on existing assets, and that's what we have here available in the Netherlands. At the Netherlands, we are, in my view, in pole position to achieve this goal, where we have the industry and the facilities nearby to make the energy in the best way possible.
Super. Martin.
Yes, good morning, everyone. I'm Martin Olsson. I head up Vergia. We are a small Norwegian project developer in renewable energy. I will not speak on behalf of the Norwegian government, but we do believe that Norway is a prime supplier of clean energy to Europe today, and really much would like to remain so. And both the government and private investors, such as ourselves, will certainly play our part. We develop power generation assets in Norway, small-scale hydropower and offshore wind, so quite broad range there. But more related to our conversation today, we have 3 green ammonia plants that are currently in development, as well as offshore hydrogen technology company so that we have set up together with Kongsberg, the leading industrial company in Norway, to really provide an interface between the wind farms and hydrogen infrastructure to come. For example, the Norway to Germany pipeline, and also the Baltic pipe that you are envisioning, and so on and so forth. When it comes to background, I was 2 decades in ABB until last year, so I really like electrons, but I also like molecules, and even more so now, and I think they're really playing well together.
Brilliant, thank you very much. And of course, all the bios are on the website as well, so if you want to find more, go there. And for those on social media, of course, if you want to see anything, hear anything, please put on social media, hashtag OEEC23, so please do it as well. I'm going to change my plan. I had a really good plan to ask you questions. I'm going to actually want to know who's in the room here, what your mindset is. So before we start, can you just put your hands up? Who's in the hydrogen business at the moment? Who's already active in hydrogen? Can you put your hands up? Okay, that's quite a lot. Okay, Eric, you had 4 points here. I just want to get a flavor from the audience if that's an issue. Who thinks financing is an issue? Can you put your hands up? Okay, a couple of people, so you're going to be busy. I can see Miriam, that's one for you to come up to. Partnerships. Anybody think partnerships is happening, not happening? Okay, so kind of a few people there. Business models. That's a big one. Okay, so quite a few people there. Okay, interesting. And the last one, supply chain and collaboration. Who thinks that's an issue? Oh, not that many. Okay, that's interesting. All right, we'll come back to it. Right, the title of this session is The Great Connector. Is it a great connector? Eric?
I think so. I mean, if you look at the, you can look at that from a various perspectives. From a technical perspective, obviously, how things are connected. But I think if you look at demand and supply, if you want to make the energy transition work, if you want to make sure that also, for instance, we have especially in Northwest Europe, have an industrial economy for the future, you need to make sure that you make the right connections between, let's say, the demand and the supply and the various parties, public and private, to make sure that we enable that. So you can look at that question from various perspectives, but I think a lot needs to be done to connect the dots. If you look at, for instance, one of the more successful things, Holland Hydrogen 1 that Shell is doing at the moment in the Netherlands, then you have the offshore wind to come in. You have the demand in the region. You can connect that with establishing a hub like that. There's some public-private funding around it, so that then the connection sort of works. But there's only a few of these at scale where that actually goes at the moment.
So, from a developer perspective, Lex and Martin, you know, is it a connector? There's more to be done. Do we need to get a smarter way connecting dots?
Yes and yes. But starting with the ambitions for offshore wind development in the North Sea, we are talking multiple hundreds of gigawatts, if you believe the plans. This will simply be impossible to integrate into the grid with electrons in a meaningful time. Not if you have an eternal time, then you can do it, but you can just talk to, for example, NKT and Prysmian and all those making a sea cable, and they are sold out, so you won't get the cable, so for start. And there are other hinders as well. Today you're curtailed already 10% of the time if you have a wind farm in the North Sea. That's not so good. So you really need some other energy carriers to really utilize the fantastic wind resources we have. So that's the fundamental. We need to utilize what we have for free and clean. And then hydrogen as a connector to the markets, it's a given. And if it's great, I don't know, not yet, perhaps, but I'm sure it will be.
Okay, before I go to Miriam, Lex, is it a connector? Yes, no? How do we do the dots?
It will be, yes. I don't think it's now, but and it has to be, because indeed, as the speakers before me mentioned, you know, you can't do everything with electrons, certainly not in the time frame that's available. If you do everything electrically, it will be slower, it will cost more money, cost more resources, and in the end will lead to more emissions to air in the time frame we're looking at, more CO2 emissions to air. So hydrogen is kind of the missing piece in there if we want to decarbonize our whole, all the products that we make and the energy that we need in the most efficient way. Yes.
So Miriam, you quoted some seriously big numbers, right? Anything that goes more than a couple of billion in my mind gets my attention. Are you connecting dots by just money, or how does it work? Are you actually saying, as you know, there's supply to be done, demand to be done? How do you see that whole connection happening, and where do you spend the money?
So we're spending now. So we're building our pipeline investing in different models. So we are looking at parts of the world that have very good renewable resource but don't have electricity demand. And there, hydrogen allows us to tap on those resources and in a way that it can be exported. So these are part of the projects that we do. The other projects most focusing in Europe would be rather targeting the local demand. But it is the case that at the moment it is difficult to make all ends meet, in particular at some point in the development stage when we would need more visibility around the returns on the investments, and we need to start talking with off-takers that will need to commit for a long period of time to off-take a product which has a big question mark on the price today. And that is, I think, where it is important that all the different market actors join forces, including the public sector, us as investors, supply chain, to kind of now take this next step together and provide more visibility in the market.
So, Eric, you quoted some seriously big numbers, right, in terms of the future where hydrogen is going. I mean, that's great. How realistic is it? Is that going to happen? Because to get it, we need to get the wind market to work it, we need to get supply and demand to work, we need to get all the dots connected. How realistic do you think these targets really are?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think well, I mentioned a couple of things that need to happen to make that a reality, obviously. So those things need to be in place. But if you look at it at the moment, we see a lot of announcements of projects in the market, and if you see the ones that are actually coming on stream and they haven't even been decided yet if they will continue or not, if all those things that are currently going on are being met, if you look at the demand by 2030, then I think, out of my head, I think we're still threefold short of actually reaching there. So it will be an enormous challenge actually to reach that. So we need to have more of those projects to come on stream to make sure that we can make up for the requirements that are there according to our studies.
Yeah. So you've seen the numbers from Eric. Just from the audience perspective, can you put your hand up if you're confident we're going to deliver these targets? Anybody confident? Anybody? Cool, Eric, what did you do to them? Anybody thinks we're never going to get there? Why are we trying? No? So most people somewhere in the middle. Okay. Lex, how are we going to give some confidence back to the audience? What do we need to do to give confidence back to the audience? We're going to get that hydrogen agenda to work. How do we get more development, more activity?
Well, I think, yeah, we need to commit to it and start doing it, right? That is, like for Neptune, we're doing, together with partners, the Poseidon project. And if we look back, we started this already in 2018, basically, so a long time ago, and we're still not producing hydrogen. We will be next year, but we had originally planned to produce it last year. But with all the hurdles, we are in that project using existing infrastructure. We put it on the platform offshore. We'll mix it with the gas stream coming out of that platform, and it will arrive in the Maasvlakte in Rotterdam. But when you go through all the hurdles, at least the hurdle, we were finding out what the hurdles are in that project. We have already learned so much. But you can only discover those hurdles when you actually start doing it. And you need to commit to it, also commit to it financially. And there's definitely a very big role there, well, for everybody here in the room and next to me, but also for the government. The commitment has stopped looking for the best solution, or whatever the best solution is, because we'll never find it. We just need to start making small steps, and if you make small steps, they become then, the transition, and they become big steps by putting them together. And so committing to it also from a public point of view, together with the innovation that private participation offers, the drive and the efficiency and all that, the brain power that we have in all our companies, I think we can make it happen. So what it needs is get going, make the steps, start making the first steps, and commit to it without knowing or having a clear view what the best solution in the end is. The concept is clear. The value of hydrogen, we just mentioned it, it will be the connector. It's needed, it's an element, a very important element in energy transition for decarbonization. And let's get it going. So as a government, I think we've learned also with another project that we're doing, H2 op Zee, that we're doing together with RWE. We had applied for financing for the National Growth Fund, for instance. last year. Did not get selected, unfortunately. Of course, I still think that's the wrong decision that was made. But one of the arguments that was made was that the hydrogen, the policy of the Dutch government in terms of offshore hydrogen was not clear yet. Well, I understand, because we have to, because there is indeed no policy. But if we start making steps, then how that policy would look and what's needed would become clear. So I think it's still a missed opportunity. Hopefully that will be changed in the near future. Well, not the National Growth Fund, but other financing models that are needed to get started. They will just be put in place as quickly as possible so that we start moving. And that's needed.
Marion, I'll come to you next, right? So again, seen the confidence from the audience here, right? Money isn't going to be a big lever on this one. I mean, your investors can put money in wind, they can put money into proven entities where the dots are already connected. Why would you put money in hydrogen in the States? We have so many other choices, which give you a lovely lower risk return.
So we definitely believe, like we're all sharing here, that the energy system is growing increasingly complex because of the volumes of renewables that are going into it. And it's a win-win situation to add more flexible assets to make that system work. So there is definitely a business case there for Power-to-X assets that will help to integrate offshore wind and will help to also balance the grid. Also, achieving decarbonization only with electrification is not sufficient, and therefore we're going to need molecules. So the fundamentals are there for good investments. And now I can at least show that at CIP as an example that also investors are ready to start taking the first steps that, as we're hearing, is what we need to get the industry moving. But it's true that it's a lot requested and asked for private investors at this stage because this is a nascent market. There's a lot of uncertainty, and it does require a little bit of a leap of faith in the market to move forward. And I think that now we have gone as far as we can, I think, in many projects, and we need more stability and a bit of a clearer framework to go and move to the next step.
Brilliant. Martin, I'll come to you next. I mean, I work in different places around the world, and there's different conversations depending on where you are. This is a European conversation, it's different in the US, different than it is in Asia. Let's talk about colors of hydrogen, right? Because I hear a lot of it. Yesterday, it's a lot of focused on green hydrogen because, of course, it's wind, it's great, fantastic. What do you think of the other elements of what is the role of blue hydrogen in the equation? What is the role of even hydrogen coming from nuclear, hydrogen coming from hydro? What are all the other hydrogens in there? And are you hydrogen color agnostic?
Yes, I am. And also, I never worked for Equinor, our energy major in Norway, but if you listen to them, and I quite buy it. I mean, blue hydrogen, now focusing on Northern Europe, will of course be the catalyst to get this going. If you don't allow that into the mix, nobody will be a pipeline because there will be nothing to fill the pipeline with. And I encourage everybody to read now the study that the gas line operator in Norway, Gassco, together with Dina, published on Friday last week about their feasibility study about a pipe from Norway to Germany. So that will obviously be first filled with blue, so we have to welcome it because there are no other ways of getting supply going. On the other hand, I would like to come back to the previous question also with the challenges. What is possible today quite easily is to make green ammonia plants because offtake is not the problem. Every ship owner is ordering dual fuel ships that can run on ammonia, etc. And there are pockets of stranded electrons here and there where you can quite easily set up a plant with available technology today. But then back to you, and another challenge is for this pipe and baseload hydrogen, which will require huge pipes, really, and long pipes. Do you choose to do it as you did with the gas pipeline and protect the first investors? Or do you do it more publicly and open for third or access to all to these pipes? This is quite a difficult question to answer. I think maybe the last one is better, but then it will require also not only your money to get that going, but also a collective of money. So that's the debate that is up there. But when back to the colors, I'm agnostic, yes.
Color agnostic, very good, interesting. Yeah. And the other views from the panel, are you color agnostic? I'm colorblind, so I know for me it's really easy to be color agnostic. What about you? Are you color agnostic, or are you feeling strong about certain things?
No, I fully agree, actually. I think that the thing is, if you discard one of them, then you won't get that economy going. I think also the investment money, that if you broaden up your opportunities a bit, will be easier to get there. We also don't have to forget, if you introduce a new energy carrier into the industry system, it takes a long time for it to flourish. We were having a discussion earlier on for natural gas. I mean, it was 1% of the whole mix in 1920, and in 1985 it was roughly 15%. If you look at what's necessary here, it's just a huge investment, and we are already making some strides, some steps, but we're nowhere near where it should be. So we need to accelerate that, other than we've done in the past with gas and coal, etc. I think also the comment that you made, and I was thinking there's some sort of a French philosopher, I forgot his name, he said, in striving to go for the best, we often neglect all the good, and therefore we come nowhere. I think the same goes for these colors. If you discriminate and say, no, that's not good, we only have to go for the green color or whatever, I'm afraid that it will end in a sort of a philosophical discussion, an idealistic discussion, which will not actually get us any further.
Okay. I'm going to do one more question before I go to the audience for questions, so be ready, please. I want to talk about the point you raised around business models. Miriam, I'm going to start with you. You're investing lots of projects around the world. You've seen some really good business models for other sectors. Any things we can learn from the wind sector, other renewable sectors, or any other thing we can apply to hydrogen to go faster? Any clever ideas about business models, approaches?
When it comes to the business model for hydrogen, it's a hybrid, I think, between renewables and what we know from former LNG investments and so on. So it's a mix between the two. I think for the earlier projects, it's, let's say, easier to work with, as was mentioned before, with existing applications of hydrogen. So it's more like a replacement of the previous grey hydrogen with green, then including some green premium on top of it because of the regulatory requirements and otherwise. But in general, I would say that we can learn a lot from the renewable energy industry and how we have managed to bring costs down for that technology over time. It is not so different at the end of the day for green hydrogen. So if we have some medium-term visibility on the returns and some commitments on that side, I think that all these business cases, we're going to see some of the first ones already taking off shortly.
Right. Any other comments from the panel on business models? Martin?
Yes, I really like the FPSO business model in deep water oil and gas, actually. So half of these type of assets are owned by the license owners, as you would know. And the other half is made available to the license on a day rate from other type of owners, typically Japanese banks or the like. And I see this business model possibly be replicated into the realm of offshore hydrogen production. So here in Netherlands and Germany, the TSO, so TenneT in many cases, owns the substation offshore, so you connect to that one if you have a wind farm. The TSO is not necessarily the best owner of an offshore processing plant, and neither is the wind farm developer, maybe with some exceptions if there are oil majors. But so I think there is a FPSO market version 2.0, if you like, that could come, and it's quite attractive, and you have a lot of good sources of capital that chase such assets. So that's one example on a good business model that we can just learn from the past.
I'm sure some people scribbling in the room. This sounds like a new business model for the supply chain. Any other comments before I go to the audience on the business models? No?
Well, I'd like to say that the business model in the end is driven, of course, by the revenue you get from green hydrogen, right? And coming back to the colors, green hydrogen is still very expensive at this moment if you compare it to the blue version. So we definitely need the blue version to get the hydrogen, let's say, business going. I fully support that. At the same time, we need to work together, coming back to your point about supply chain collaboration, to drive the price of of green hydrogen down. And again, need to get started there, but also offer supply chain the view of what will be coming in 5 to 10 or whatever years after that, so that they can invest in that and have something to see what their end game is, what their price is. Because whichever business model there is, if green hydrogen is not competitive in the market, it will be very difficult to develop any business model. But it needs the first step, it needs public funding, it needs supply chain certainty for the supply chain partners, to be able to deliver that.
Well said, well said. Anything else to add, Eric, before I go on? Okay, right, audience, there's a microphone coming if you have a question. Will you please mention your name and keep the question short? That would be great. I'm going to start here first, then we'll come back to the gentleman in the back. Oh, one forward, sorry. You are looking very frightened suddenly. It was a bit worrying.
Good morning. Wiep Volkert, chairman of the platform Offshore Solar. I do have a question for Eric, but any other comments will be welcome. Eric, you mentioned in your slide that offshore solar energy is, you see it as a building block in this hydrogen revolution. Can you comment on the logic why you see offshore solar as a building block?
Before we go there, sorry, is there anything behind your question? Obviously you work for a solar organization. Yeah. Hold on, can we get the mic back? Michelle, sorry, before you go, Eric, because there was something.
Of course, I'm always looking for sanitizing our own ideas, why we work on offshore solar.
Right, with that filter in mind, Eric.
I think the whole I think it's an interesting question, and I've also always been personally just also interested about the developments in solar in general, but also in the offshore space. I think you need to have multiple sources. You need to have wind, solar, etc., next to each other to make sure that there's enough potential to develop green hydrogen. And I think we've had a lot of attention for wind, obviously, also, by the way, in this conference, which is very logical also given the proximity of this place. But I believe there's still a lot of untapped potential in solar. And we've done quite some studies in that as well that prove that there's much more to be had. That's why I believe it's a fundamental building block, besides all the other things that were mentioned. Okay. So I hope that we are at least aligned. But
any other comments from anybody?
I can imagine that there's...
From my side, we do see on the onshore projects that we have that there is a very good combination between wind and solar when it's about creating a business case for hydrogen, because it creates a better kind of stable load for the electrolyzer. I must say that for the offshore solar, the costs at the moment seem very high. And already, as we said, green hydrogen itself, it's already higher than where we would want it to be. So maybe for these two technologies to match, it's still a bit of time to go.
So I think the challenge for you is next year's conference, make it the second great connector. That would be fantastic. So after hydrogen, fantastic. I'm going to take the question in the back.
Yep, thank you. My name is Bart de Vries. I work for Royal Skoning DHV. This is a question, I guess, for the Dutch people in the panel, but obviously Miriam and Martin can also comment. Last week we had elections, and it looks like we might get a government which is much less in favor of, for instance, things like SD++ subsidies. To what extent do you think this will be an additional risk for green hydrogen projects? Because, Lex, you just said public funding is absolutely necessary. So could you please comment on that?
Okay, I'm going to make the question slightly more generic so the panel can do it. So politics and how the implications on developing the hydrogen agenda. So maybe I'm going to start, Lex, with you. Yeah. Don't make it necessarily with the Netherlands, but I want to, because they make it slightly more generic.
Yeah. No, yeah, politics clearly have a large influence driving the energy transition. As I said, and also recognized here, public funding and support is needed, and the drive to do that is fundamental to making it happen. So yes, it's coming back to the specific point still. I mean, it's a concern, definitely, and but in the end, we all do this together. We are all persons that have our I guess all in one way or another we're leading this energy transition together. So we should also not let these incidents, as they still are, in my view, guide us and hold us back. Now we are doing the right thing, and doing the right thing is what's important. Yeah, mentioned earlier, and it's a bit of a generic comment, I know that, but keep our eye on the ball. What's needed to get the energy transition going, and also politics are fluid. Hopefully they are fluid at this moment. So I think there's definitely opportunity. It's long term. It's needed. So we need to keep driving it.
But can I maybe the question, I want to make it a bit broader for others to answer as well. What is the role of government to develop the hydrogen agenda, right? Because, elections happen every 4 or 5 years. We can't plan a 50-year business on the next election. What is the role of government to make hydrogen a success? Eric, can I go to you next? I'll go to Miriam.
Yeah, so I think, coming back to the question, I personally don't think it's a positive development. It depends a bit on what goes on and how the coalitions are being formed, etc. I can also imagine that they'll backtrack on what's currently there, but I don't think it's not something I would view as a positive development, given the statements that were earlier made. I'm not sure how firm they are. Then if I think indeed of the role of governments, if we look at, for instance, the way that they can infuse both the supply and demand side. For instance, if we compare it with the IRA, for instance, in the US, which is very much focused on the supply side, we've seen a shift going to the US. Whereas in Europe, we focus a bit more on incentives on the demand side, also with the hydrogen bank, of course, a bit also on the supply side. But I think at this moment of uncertainty, you're right, every 5 years, but there should be at least some sort of solidification of earlier commitments and statements, which will give the time frame and the horizon for companies to do and financial institutions to do the investments to make sure that you create that market. And I personally think that is a bit wobbly. Yep. If I talk with my clients at least, and of course you could also argue, well, what are they doing then to step up themselves? It's a fair question as well. Yeah.
So Marian and Martin, you can elect to comment on Dutch politics, or you make it more what the role of government is. But
actually I'd like to rewind 120 years perhaps and see what worked when you built up what you can label a hydrogen economy in Norway at the time, with hydropower into making ammonia for fertilizer, right? So it was kind of invented a long time ago. And that worked not because politicians made great models. It worked because you let demand and supply meet quite freely, and not intervening with CFDs or whatever. I'm not in principle against CFDs, but I'm more in favor of letting industry and generation find a good solutions together. I think that really could be something that we could try to figure out also here in the next generation of hydrogen to come, 100 years plus later on. And then furthermore, to take the Scandinavian or Nordic perspective again. So we really like to supply molecules now, mainly natural gas to Europe, but we really dislike interchanging power, because that influences your electricity price today, right? So that's more maybe not a political challenge, but a communication challenge. It's like energy is energy in a way, and it's good to trade it, or it creates value. So I will leave that up to those that are better in communication than myself, but it's to me a paradox, this one.
So an interesting opportunity. Yeah. Miriam, anything to add?
Maybe just a comment that when we invest globally, this topic around policies and changes in governments is something that is relevant everywhere. So the Netherlands, in this case, would not be different than investing anywhere else in Europe. I think the advantage of investing in Europe is that there is such a general trend and support towards decarbonization that a change in a government alone will likely not be a decisive factor of whether investing or not if the fundamentals are right. So I think what we aim to do is to try to look for the business cases that are more resilient to through regulatory changes. So regulatory changes or a good regulatory framework, it's always a very good starting point, and I fully agree that what we have seen now in the US is attracting all our attention to that part of the world, and I hope that the EU steps up, and so we can also invest here in the same way we're doing in the US. But at the same time, investing only based on support schemes has proven very dangerous in the past in the renewable industry, so I hope that we've all learned a bit from that.
Brilliant question, by the way. Fantastic. The panel members are available afterwards, so if you want to follow up, we'll do that. Is there any on this side? That side's been very heavy. Any questions here? I'm going to go, quick question here, then I'll come to you here. Gentleman in the middle here.
Yeah, maybe just a completely different perspective. Frank Reeve from the North Sea Foundation. I'm probably only for ecology here. The interesting point is, when you were saying that visibility is an issue, I think the public acceptance of all these types of energy are really relating to basically being green. So, and I hear a lot of financial input here, but isn't it really important to focus on the green aspect? And there's my worry. Could you guys elaborate a little bit more on that offshore hydrogen story? Because that's where my concern is. Because we have an issue here on the oceans, making it an industrial space. How well are we? Are we including the ecology discussion enough in going offshore?
Brilliant. Lex.
Yeah, no, excellent question. And I guess at the moment, no, if I'm honest. We are looking at, from a system perspective, how can we use that space that we need in the end to create the energy that we need, also the hydrogen that we need. So, but it's definitely on the radar. I would say it's getting in there, and so we need to look at the areas where we can do it well, as green also in that aspect, ecological standpoint, as good as possible. So and steps are being taken there. Investigations on the sea bottom and life around there are being performed. Also, recently there was also let's say about how do you call it, the piling of these installations, a topic around that. And we need to definitely look at how we can do it in the best way, also in an ecological sense. And so yeah, that's basically where we are at the moment, I think. But one of the useful things is here that we already have a lot of infrastructure in the North Sea. When you look at building new pipelines, why would we build new pipelines if we have existing pipelines that already can carry so much? Then, so if you would build it new, you would remove the old pipeline and then lay a new one. So you do 2 times ecological damage, especially also in coastal areas. So I think really looking what we already have, build on that, and also then put that additional perspective of what you need to build newly, like the windmills and everything. Look at the areas where you can do that, and I think you can, if you overlay these layers, you can find the best spots that you also get the ecological best solution. But that there will be an ecological effect is without a doubt. Yeah, I think.
Yesterday there was a panel about nature enhancement, nature positives. There's some great bits coming out. And maybe, can I put a request back on you as well? If you have any good ideas, can you just come have a chat afterwards? Because I'm sure we want to hear about it. So, any other panel members? Martin?
Yes, I agree with you very much that more can be done in that space. It should also be said that we haven't moved offshore as of yet. It's just in its infancy with hydrogen. So at least from the supply chain side, a lot of good steps are taken, and maybe regulatory regime is lagging a little bit behind. That factor is important. Another one that is important is the human factor. So the first oil rigs and so were designed with quite heavy manning in not so safe and secure environments. I see now that all the players that are targeting this space are thinking quite differently, with as low manned or autonomous assets at sea as possible. This is a good thing. So people can be more close to their natural habitat, so to say, closer to the family and the people they love. So that's not really ecology, but it's also very important that we, of course, take care of the environment, also taking care of the people from the beginning and think right about that aspect. And I think I see good steps there.
I want to get as many questions as possible. So again, if we can follow up, would be great. I'm going to go here in the front first, and then I'll come back later on. Go that way now.
Mohamed El Mamoun from the private sector in Mauritania. Mauritania is located between Senegal and Morocco, West and North Africa. CWP is signing a contract of $40 trillion to develop the hydrogen in Mauritania. Now we are assisting to Total, Chariot, Shell, all these measures coming for the development of the hydrogen. Last week, the exhibition conference, CWP made the announcement of good results about the feasibility study they were doing. We are assisting now to German, French, and Spanish companies coming to Mauritania, as you said, Eric, to develop the market, because the Mauritanian government is giving a lot of priorities and advantages to the international companies. My question is, Netherlands, I mean, Dutch companies are not present in that project. Can we expect them to come, or Mauritania or North Africa are not priorities of these companies?
Okay, panel, who's positioned to answer that? Miriam?
I cannot comment on the Dutch side of things, but I'd say that at least in the Energy Transition Fund, we currently have a development, very large scale in Morocco, that we hope would use the good solar and wind resource to transform hydrogen into green ammonia. And we're also investing in Oman. We also have very good relations with CWP, and we can understand the thinking behind their projects of tapping on good natural resources in areas that there is not extensive needs for local demand. I definitely believe that the decarbonization in Europe cannot be achieved only with the resources that we have in Europe, and therefore imports will be necessary. But in that context, I still believe that when we look at hydrogen as the end use of Power-to-X, hydrogen produced locally in the North Sea based on offshore wind will be competitive with other forms of hydrogen, for example, transport as ammonia and crack back to hydrogen here. So I really see two different applications for the end product of these different projects.
Brilliant. Okay. Fantastic. I was going to go this way here. Is that all right, to the front here? You were there before, yes, the lady in the back, in the second row.
Thank you. My name is Alike Galema. I work with Tata Steel in Europe. Sorry. Obviously, we are involved in the hydrogen discussion in many aspects. But I wanted to come back to Miriam's comment that we need a more clear framework to be able to move to the next step. Tata Steel, amongst others, obviously is designing new products. As you said, innovations are needed also in pipeline. But we find it hard to innovate because there is not, a lot of clarity on the requirements. And I think a lot of, potential supply chain partners struggle with that. So my question was, to come back to your comment, we need a better framework. When do we expect the framework to be there, or more clarity to be there, so that everybody can just jump in? Thank you.
I often ask myself the same question. So when is it that finally we're going to have that framework there that gives us all the clarity that we need? I definitely think that in Europe we are possibly in the position you were explaining earlier, that for aiming for the best, we're missing a bit only the good steps. So sometimes we want to make things so perfect with all these, for example, RFNBO definitions, that we get lost in the detail and in the processes, and we miss the opportunity to take action more in the short term. So I do think that we have made quite a lot of progress, and I would hope that now with the new hydrogen bank subsidy scheme, for example, that is being launched, even if that is not the regulatory framework itself, it will be a very good instrument to create transparency on a price point for hydrogen. And I think that this will be a very helpful step in conversations with off-takers, for example, like yourselves on the green steel part.
Brilliant. Martin, you want to add something there?
Yes, framework, I agree, steps are taking, but I also think everybody should look themselves in the mirror, perhaps, because we as very end users also have a role to play here. And let me ask then, when you fly, for example, are you willing to pay for sustainable fuel? When you buy a car or something with a lot of steel in it, do you really look for how much of that steel is green? And if you build a house or something, do you look how really was the foundation made, with type of cement was there, and are you willing yourself as a person to pay a little bit more for that? I leave it there.
Yeah, brilliant, fantastic.
Yeah, no, one thing I'd like to comment here is that maybe also not the first reflex of a company should be to look at the government, how we can get funding or a framework, right? I think you can also look as a business, look for business-to-business solutions and find the connection there with, if let's say we would be producing green hydrogen offshore, we see that possibility. Why don't we directly connect with Tata Steel? How can we bring it to your factory so that you can decarbonize quickly? And I think that's sometimes the framework is not always needed. I understand, of course, the economics can be difficult, but maybe there are the business solutions possible, integrated solutions, and then with that integrated solution, we can maybe indeed go to the government or whatever EU institution or financing to get it going and be creative there. Yeah.
I'm going to come back to you very quickly. When do you need it by, this new business model? Can we get the microphone back very quickly? Do you need it this year, next year?
Well, it depends on how you look at it. So we need the green hydrogen ASAP, but obviously we are also in a transition. But on the other side, we would also like to supply some pipelines for that solution. So it's two-sided.
Okay, challenge later on. Brilliant. I'll take one or two questions. One at the back. Can we go there? All the way at the back.
Yes. Hello, good morning. I'm Timothy Vervaat from Ghent University, Belgium. And I'm missing something in this discussion. So I'm asking you to clarify something, because we present here hydrogen as molecules and electricity as electrons. So actually both as energy carriers. But in fact, yeah, we do electrolysis with electricity to create hydrogen. So at that point, hydrogen is an energy storage system. So then by inverse electrolysis, by adding oxygen, we create again electricity and water. So this comes at a cost at a very low efficiency. So at that point, is one business case for hydrogen to create back electricity. But another option could be to use hydrogen for internal combustion as well. So in that case, it can be seen as an energy carrier. So the point I'm missing in this discussion, how do you see the end use of the hydrogen, and how do you going to deal with the drawback of low efficiency for the fuel cells or low energy density, for example, if it's internal combustion?
So there's a lot in that question. So can we start about end use? Eric, you talked about in your context around how hydrogen is used. What do you see the end use and the kind of different elements around it?
First of all, I'm not an engineer, so when it comes to how to convert all these things, that's not something I'm very familiar with. But when it comes to the use of it, it's a very expensive molecule. So what we see is that, for instance, for certain elements, it will probably not make a lot of sense. When you look at, for instance, just cars, we believe probably the electrons will continue to thrive, unless it's for very heavy trucks or aviation. When it comes to cement, steel, hard to abate sectors, green steel, for instance, if you put that in a BMW, probably people are willing to pay that premium because that car is already so expensive. So I think it will be useful only in certain applications, where it's either very hard to abate, like where you need very high temperatures, or the willingness to pay is there to be able to spend it on it. I'm not sure if that answers your question. That's at least how I interpret it.
Can anybody else want to add? Because I wanted to shift to a few very quick fire questions. Anything else want to add? Because there's a lot in that question, right? So, and then you might have to follow with the panel members afterwards. Miriam, what you want to say anything on this one?
Nothing to add really.
No, I think the efficiency question is not so interesting actually, because I mean internal combustion of modern cars are also about 30% efficiency, but it's more about the total value you need that you need to get the green molecules. And yeah, where the best use of those molecules is, the market will define that. The price that we're willing to pay will define it. And I would agree that if you just burn it for electricity, it's maybe not the most efficient way. You better use that electricity as much in, let's say, the direct applications that you have for that. So we need to electrify our industry, our homes, as much as possible. But there will be a factory, let's say, a market remaining for green hydrogen. And there, the efficiency question is, again, not so relevant. It's more about the price of the green molecule. Right.
Okay. Conscious of time, and again, this discussion, I live in the United Kingdom, we have all the time around how to use hydrogen, what's the right the value chain. So I think this will be a continued debate. Conscious of time, I want to end up in a kind of pick your brains, right? So, COP28 starts tomorrow. If I get you a speaking slot, and you have to give one message to the world around the future of hydrogen, what's the one message you'll leave for the world leaders if you had the opportunity? Eric? Short and sharp.
Don't strive for the best, go for the good things.
Okay, go for the good, don't strive for the best. Miriam?
Same on my side, so take action. Let's make this happen in the short term as well, not wait only for the large-scale projects.
Next, what will you say to the world leaders?
Well, at COP28, if I would be there, I would say, listen, we are producing green hydrogen offshore on our Poseidon project. And we have the next project in development, and that's the way to go indeed, as you say, not go for the best, start walking, start talking, I mean not talking, yeah, talking too of course, but get going, yeah.
Martin?
Yeah.
Yes, build the infrastructure that is natural monopolies, such as pipelines, and then let demand and supply meet freely.
Okay, brilliant. Earlier on, I asked the audience about the confidence of how fast we go in the targets, and there was a kind of, I would characterize lowish confidence, right? 5 years from now, I'll put you back on this podium. What would you like, what would we have done? What should we have done to get confidence back here? Miriam?
So I think we should have seen a lot more projects getting to construction stage. We would have already seen many of the mid-scale projects already in production and then getting ready for the larger scale projects of already 500 megawatts plus. So that's where we would like to be.
Martin?
Hopefully cost deflation again in the offshore wind sector, so we can get starting in building that out more, and your pipe in the Baltic Sea ready.
Fair enough.
That for sure.
100% of the announcements converted into actual projects and a big funnel built to substantiate the growth.
All right. Next?
Yeah, well, yeah, all of these things basically that have been said, but I would really like also that we have had a look at which assets we can reuse to make the energy transition cleaner, faster and cheaper by integrating the energy systems.
Fantastic. One very quick question before I close out, right? There's a lot of supply chain companies here in the room. They're all looking for clarity, what to invest in, what to do. What's the message you have for the supply chain? Is it focus on particular areas, do particular things? What's the message you want? Martin, what do you want from the supply chain?
Yes, the electrolyzers do not have to be perfect, just need to be scalable.
Scalable, yeah. Lex?
Yeah, well, I mean, have confidence that the market will be out there and indeed start investing into, or keep investing, of course, but in developing these solutions that we need to produce these green molecules. Yeah.
Miriam, what's the message?
I'd say also find the right partnerships for scale and cost out.
Yeah. Wow, Eric?
Yeah. Find the right partners and build, collaborate, and just get going.
Fantastic. There's a real message here of get on with it. With the Nike principle, just do it. Well then, I'm really sorry we're out of time. I know there's a lot of questions, but the panel members promised to be here available afterwards, so please come and find them. That would be great to maybe follow up on some of the conversations. So first of all, a big thank you for being here. Thank you for your engagement. Thank you for your questions. It's really helpful. There are more sessions this afternoon, so please come back if you want to hear about other parts, or go to the stage where some really great sessions taking place. We're going to close this, but please join me in thanking our fantastic panel and for the great answers they give. So thank you very much.